Hello you guys and welcome to my channel. My name is Katie and I'm a wedding photographer in the lovely state of North Carolina. And today I want to share how you can start shooting in manual mode on your camera and why you should do it. We're gonna go all over all of that in this video. So as a wedding photographer, I only shoot in manual mode on my camera. Nothing changes when it comes to that. And I wanted to share, I guess before we start really getting into it, shooting in manual mode can be kind of scary. I don't know why, it kind of can be. I was very nervous to shoot in manual for a very long time, but all of the blogs and videos and everyone kept saying, if you're not shooting in manual mode, what are you doing? You need to start. And it's kind of scary, but once you learn them, and it's so true, once you learn all of the settings and all the things that you can do in manual mode, everything gets better. I cannot imagine not shooting in manual mode now. And I was one of the people who is a little afraid to be in control or in charge of everything because I didn't know what everything was or what everything did. But now that I shoot in manual mode, I can't imagine not. I can't imagine shooting in any kind of automatic mode at all. So all this to say is I'm encouraging you to try out manual mode, really get comfortable, and I promise that you will love it and you will never go back once you start shooting in manual mode. Okay, so how can you put your camera in manual mode? Mine is on the very, very top. It is the M. You just move the little dial. There's aperture, priority, some other things, auto, scene, no flash, I don't know, there's a bunch of ones. So I just move it to the M, which is manual. So then we can get right into the different settings. And I'm only gonna be covering 3 of the main settings. There is a lot to do with your camera, but I think if you're just starting shooting in manual mode, I focus on these 3 key settings, and then you can move on from there, because again, there's a lot that you can do in manual mode, but we're just gonna focus on the aperture, the f-stop, the ISO, and the shutter speed. Those are the 3 key things that you can control in manual mode, and that's what we're gonna be focusing on today. I'm going to be putting this in like the simplest form possible because that's how my brain works and that's how I learned. So basically the f-stop, the higher the number, the more things in focus. The lower the number, the least amount of things in focus. So this f-stop, I can have it down to 1.8, but I can go all the way up to 16. So what does that mean? More things in focus, less things in focus. So if I'm shooting a portrait of one person or a couple, I will have the f-stop extremely low, 1.8, maybe 2. Because I want them to be in focus, but I want that creamy background behind them to be nice and blurry. So that's what that is. So if you have your aperture up more, that background, more and more of that background will be in focus. For wedding photography, I try to keep it as low as possible, but let's say for the family formals or the bridal party, I will have to up it to make sure everyone is in focus. So for me, a wedding party, or like the bridesmaids, let's say there's 3 on each side, 6, I might bring it up to 4, but then you have to adjust your other settings, which we'll get into in a second. But f-stop is, in my brain, lower number, less things in focus, higher number, more things in focus, okay? It also has to do with like how the light hits your camera too. So the lower the f-stop, the brighter your photo will be, and the higher the f-stop, the darker it will be. So that's why it's important to know all 3 of these settings because they work together. But again, to try to keep it simply, if you are shooting one person, keep the f-stop as low as possible and you'll get that nice creamy background. If you're shooting more people, you want to increase it to make sure everybody is in focus, okay? So the next setting that we'll kind of go into is the ISO. So I believe that is how much light is coming into your camera. So it controls the light brightness of it. So the lower the ISO, the darker your image will be. The higher the ISO, the brighter your image will be. However, there is this fun little catch that no one told me about. The higher your ISO, the more grainy your photo could look. So that's why we put external flashes on our cameras during receptions, because if you bump up your ISO so much and you go in to edit it, it could be really grainy. So be careful with ISO. I like to keep that as low as possible. So mine has like a low ISO settings, but I will keep it around 100 to 200. Sometimes even around 400, depending on where we are in your personal style. I will go higher depending on the situation, but I don't like to. If it looks good and I kind of know my camera a little bit, if it looks good at like 800 or even sometimes 1,000, I will go up that high. But for the most part, if you're like in natural light or whatever, or you have a nice big window, you don't need to up your ISO that much. I would encourage you to practice having your ISO turned up really high versus really low, and find where you're comfortable with your editing style and your photography style. But general rule of thumb, the higher the ISO, the brighter the photo, possible more grain, the lower the ISO, the darker the image can be. So now the third settings is the shutter speed, and that's kind of self-explanatory, how fast your shutter goes, right? So you can go, let me see how far I can go down. I can go 1 over, oh my gosh, I can go like 1/1. That's insane. And then you can go 1 over like 5,000. Like you can go, 8,000. You can go pretty crazy with your shutter speed. I like to start at 200 to 250 and never go below that, because as a wedding photographer, people are moving, like you can't control everything. If my shutter is open too long, so I hit the shutter button and it doesn't immediately take the photo, someone could have moved in that time, or my hands may not hold my camera as steady as I need in that moment. So having a little bit higher of a shutter speed will keep your photos sharp. And I will say, depending on where it is, I will up this even more, but I do not go under 200. That was a rule of thumb. I think some photographer said in a video, like they never go below 200 for a portrait, so no, I don't. And it does help your photos look very, very sharp. I will also say the lower the shutter speed, the brighter the photo. The higher the shutter speed, the darker the photo. So again, there's a little catch. If you want to up your shutter speed to 1/5,000, your image can be very, very dark because it's not letting the sun and the light get in, it's just going. You know what I mean? It's a balance between the three, but now I'm going to get into my settings and kind of how I change them based on the situation that I'm in. So now that we know all three of the main ones, I'll go over kind of the basics again, and then I'll get into my personal settings and how I use the three cohesively. So the f-stop, the lower the number, the less in focus and the brighter. The higher the number, the more in focus, but the darker the photo. For ISO, the lower the number, the darker the photo, and the higher the number, the brighter the photo, but it could also have grain. For shutter speed, the lower the number, the brighter the photo, but it could be out of focus. The higher the number, the sharper the image, but it could be darker. So those are the basics. Now let's get into my settings and how I kind of use them together. So this is a very close-up lens. Hold on, let me turn it on. So I am going to start with my settings at, my f-stop is 1.8. We're just gonna take a picture of this coffee mug. I might have to change my lens because this is gonna be so freaking close. I'm gonna do that, hold on. Off. Okay. All right, thank you for bearing with me. Yeah, I should put the lens cap back on, Katie. Come on, take care of your stuff. Okay, so I am going to show you my different settings and how we're just gonna take a picture of this coffee mug right here. I wonder if you can see it. Let me check. Okay, I'm pretty sure I'm in focus. It'll be fine. So we're just gonna take a picture of this coffee mug right here. So I'm going to start with my settings. I always start with the same settings. So I start with my f-stop at 1.8, and then my ISO at 100, and then my shutter speed at 1/200. This is where I start, and then I start making adjustments from there. So this is just gonna be an example. I'm gonna take a picture of this coffee mug, and it is very, very dark. I'm gonna try and put them in here. Very, very dark for my taste. So what I'm going to do is actually up my ISO. So we're gonna see what it looks like, just upping it to 200. So it is a little bit brighter. So let's see how we can do up to 400. Yeah, I think 400, in reality I would move back because this is very, very close. Yeah, so I would be happy with this and then editing it from there. So what I ended up with is the shutter speed and the f-stop didn't change. I just upped my ISO because this is a very still image. So it's something like that. So, but let's say, you know, I want more of the mug in focus. So I want to up my f-stop to, let's say, 4. I'm gonna keep my ISO, I'm gonna bump that back down to, no, I'm gonna keep it at 400, and I'm gonna keep my shutter speed at 1/200, okay? So now I'm gonna take a picture, and yes, a lot more is in focus, but now the photo is very, very dark. So now I'm gonna go back to my ISO, and I'm going to up it to 800. And it is a lot brighter. These are not the best photos. Also, my mug is dirty because I've been drinking out of it. But let's see. If this was a real wedding day, I would be in front of the actual window. But, I mean, let's go all the way up to 1,000 ISO. You know, the more of the mug is in focus, and I think that's about as high as I would go. Let's just go crazy and we'll go up to 1,600. And you know what? That's actually not bad. So I might go up that high, but it really just depends on your camera settings and what your camera can handle. But you can see more of the mug is in focus because we upped that f-stop. But because we did that, we needed to up the ISO as well. I did not want to decrease my shutter speed just because I still wanted a very sharp photo. But let's say I'm outside and I want to take a photo. I'll just insert one from a recent wedding. Those settings, I actually would keep my ISO at 100, keep my f-stop at maybe a 2. And then if it's still too bright, I'll just keep increasing my shutter speed. So sometimes if I'm outside and it's a very bright day, my shutter speed is very, very high. So that's just like something really easy that I can think of because I don't want to increase the f-stop just to make it darker, just because more things will be in focus then. If it is just like insanely bright, even with a very high shutter speed, I will up my f-stop. So that's kind of my thought process behind something really simple like this, and also something like taking a portrait outside. I hope this made sense and that I didn't just ramble for a really long time. I hope this was helpful because I know shooting in manual is just like the best thing for photography. It's like the best situation, and I have like no regrets shooting in manual and learning it, and I just want it to be easy for people to learn. So I hope this was not confusing for you. I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you start shooting in manual mode. Just practice, honestly. Practice makes perfect. It's not gonna come as easy right out of the get-go, but I really encourage you to focus and, you know, learn as much as you can and shoot in manual. If you have any additional questions, because I know sometimes I make these videos, I think they make sense, and then sometimes I don't answer questions, or I watch it back and I'm like, Katie, you just rambled the whole time. Great. So if you have any additional questions about shooting in manual mode, about like those 3 specific settings, please leave them down in the comments below. I will do my best to answer all the questions, and let's just start a conversation and help each other out learning manual mode. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye!